Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Charts with Dan. It was a bit of a sleepy week at the box office, as it has been for a lot of 2024. So we're going to look at the top 10 and everything we always do. And I'm going to do a little bit of a state of the box office to look at just where we are in comparison to the few years preceding the pandemic, as well as where we've been historically. So look forward to that. But before we do that, let's jump into the top 10. It was thought that Abigail and Civil War would be grappling for that number one spot, but Civil War ended up winning it fairly handily by a little less than $1 million. It dropped 56.4% in its second weekend. Given how divisive the movie was, that's actually not a bad drop considering, I think, what it could have been. $11.1 million delivers the number one spot. Like I said, a pretty sleepy weekend. Civil War's now at $44.8 million total. Abigail comes in second place at $10.2 million, a little bit under what some people thought it might do. It had a B cinema score, so we'll see how it holds up in the weeks to come. In third place was Godzilla Kong: The New Empire. It holds well at 38.4%, another $9.5 million. Its domestic total is now around $171 million. Guy Ritchie's The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. It's an unwieldy name, and it's a fourth place finish at $8.9 million. That's Ritchie's seventh best opening as a director and his best since 2020's The Gentleman, so his best post-pandemic opening. And then Spy Family Code White opens in fifth place at $4.8 million. Let's talk about some of those movies in the top five, and we'll start with Civil War, which was number one at the box office and is now one of the five highest grossing A24 films of all time domestically. When we look at this chart, Everything Everywhere All at Once is an easy number one at $77.1 million. Then we have Uncut Gems at $50 million, Lady Bird at $48.9, Talk to Me at $48.2, and Civil War at $44.8. So unless the bottom really drops out, it looks like it should capture that number two spot where Uncut Gems is right now. It's just edged out Hereditary by about $800,000, though it should be noted that Hereditary is getting an IMAX re-release this week. That's right, Wednesday. Hereditary will be playing in IMAX theaters around the country. As you can expect, I am very excited by this, and I can't wait to see it in IMAX for the first time. So there might be a little bit of inching up, but I don't think that this re-release is going to do enough business to put it over Civil War when it comes to this A24 list. So Civil War now number 5 on the A24 list and looking to move upwards. Abigail was in second place. It is a movie about vampires, as was spoiled by the trailers. And when we look at vampire movie openings for this decade, so for the 2020s specifically, Abigail had the second best opening for a vampire film in the 2020s. Morbius has that number one spot at $39 million. Abigail trailing with a distant $10.2 million. It opened higher than Renfield did on pretty much the same weekend last April. It also opened better than The Invitation back in August of 2022, which opened to $6.8 million, and opened better than The Last Voyage of the Demeter back in August of 2023, which opened to $6.5 million. So not a whole lot of prestige there as far as box office grosses for vampire films in the 2020s. I was going to do the top openings for vampire films in the 21st century, but it was all Twilight. So just Twilight, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's your list. I also did something kind of silly with Abigail because I enjoy doing stupid things here on the show. I made a chart of the top 10 domestic grosses for films sharing the name of a U.S. First Lady. Yeah, this is where we are right now. Hey, the summer movie season starts soon. The number one movie is Lucy, starring Scarlett Johansson, easily number one at $126.6 million. Lucy shares the name with Rutherford B. Hayes' wife, Lucy, the first lady with a college degree, and the first lady to widely be called the First Lady, so I guess it's appropriate that Lucy's at number one there. In second place is Lady Bird at $48.9 million. Lady Bird Johnson, wife of Lyndon B. Johnson. Her actual name was Claudia, but because she was so widely known as Lady Bird, I had to allow it. In third place was Harriet, which is a biopic about Harriet Tubman at $43 million, but is an interesting footnote as far as first ladies go because Harriet Lane is the first lady being referred to here, the only first lady not to be married to the president. James Buchanan was a bachelor, and so Harriet Lane, his niece, came in to serve the function of the First Lady. In fourth place is Hannah, although spelled a little bit differently, also starring Saoirse Ronan. She stars in 2 of these films, Lady Bird and Hannah. Hannah refers to Hannah Van Buren, who actually died before Martin Van Buren was president, but she is listed on the official White House history site as a First Lady, so I'm counting it. And then in fifth place is Elizabeth at $30 million. Elizabeth was the first name of 2 First Ladies, Elizabeth Monroe and Elizabeth Truman, better known as Bess. It should also be noted that Cate Blanchett stars in Elizabeth and is also in Hannah. So Saoirse Ronan in 2 of these movies, Cate Blanchett also in 2 of these movies. For the few of you that are still watching, and it was a great tactical decision on my part to put this list so early in the show, let's just throw American history into the box office show for no reason. The one movie that was actually about a First Lady that shared the name of a First Lady was Jackie, starring Natalie Portman as Jackie Kennedy, but that movie didn't make enough money to be in the top 5. Hey, let's talk about movies on this movie show, and let's talk about the legendary MonsterVerse. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire has now passed the domestic gross, unadjusted for inflation, of Kong Skull Island, which makes it now the second highest grossing film in Legendary's MonsterVerse domestically. It's now about $29 million behind 2014's Godzilla if it wants to be number 1 as far as MonsterVerse films. We'll see if it has the legs to get there before the summer movie season takes over. So we have Godzilla vs. Kong in 5th place at just over $100 million. That was a day-and-date streaming release. Then Godzilla King of the Monsters at 110.5, Kong Skull Island at 168, and Godzilla Kong: The New Empire at 171.7. Let's take a look at numbers 6 through 10 this past weekend. Kung Fu Panda 4 drops 15.2% in its 7th week of release, a $4.6 million total for a domestic gross of $180 million. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire drops 22.7% in its 5th week of release for a $4.4 million gross. It has now passed the $100 million mark domestically after the big drop and everything. I had some doubt as to whether it was going to be able to do it, but it was able to leg out to have decent holds in these last couple weeks, and it has now passed $100 million. Dune Part 2 spends an 8th week. It is the longest tenured movie in the top 10, with a 32% drop at number 8, $2.9 million. Its domestic total is now at $276.6 million. And then 2 very similar posters, once again right next to each other. Monkey Man in its 3rd week drops 44% for a $2.2 million total, a domestic total of $21.7 million. And The First Omen in its 3rd week of release, dropping 52.9% for a $1.79 million total. Its domestic gross is now at around $17.8 million. I mentioned Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. This is how it stacks up against the other films in the Ghostbusters franchise. Again, unadjusted for inflation, $102.9 million. Currently, it's about $10 million behind Ghostbusters 2 if it wants to have that 4th place spot on the franchise list. We'll see if it's able to get there. Dune Part 2 is a movie I wanted to talk about briefly because I did a chart last week about its theatrical profitability, and I did some facts and figures and estimates, as I try to do here on the show, the best that I could, but it was pointed out to me by several people that I had put the marketing budget higher than was initially reported. There were some media reports that had the marketing budget for Dune Part 2 at around $100 million. I think I put it at $150 million last week because I hadn't seen those particular articles, and that seemed about right for a movie of its size. But because there were multiple reports saying that $100 million was the marketing spend on Dune Part 2, I have adjusted my profitability outlook. So let's take a look at those updated numbers. Again, this is a Legendary film, so it's possible that more than 22.5% is coming back from China, since Legendary is partly owned by Chinese interests. But I don't really know if that's the case, so we're going to go with our standard 22.5% share. That's $10.9 million back from China, a $148.6 million return from its international run, then $66.6 million from the first week of domestic release, $35.8 million from the second week of domestic release, and then $50 million from its gross after week 2. We look at the budget, which is $190 million, the updated marketing budget at $100 million. We put the cost now of the movie at $290 million. Its worldwide gross is now just under $700 million. I estimate a net of $312.1 million And against the new production costs of $290 million, that means that I'm estimating that Dune Part 2, if these numbers are accurate, is now profitable in the theatrical window, which means that it is going to make a nice sum of money for Legendary and Warner Brothers, however they break that money out, because this doesn't include all of the other ancillary streams. It's now on digital. It'll be on physical media soon. I think a lot of people like myself are going to buy it on physical media because it is such an experience and you want that 4K thing. So Dune Part 2 is going to be a moneymaker here. And again, it sounds like we're going to be getting the third Dune film based off of the box office results. That's a sound financial decision because this is going to make money. We had 3 one-week appearance films drop out of the top 10 this past weekend. The 20th anniversary re-release of Shrek 2 drops out, as does the golf drama The Long Game, and Suga August Detour D-Day the movie, also out of the top 10 after just 1 week. I also made a bit of a change to one of the charts that we do every week. Usually I show the movies that lost the most theaters from weekend to weekend, but I found that a lot of times that excludes movies that also add a whole bunch of theaters. So this chart will now be the biggest theater count changes from weekend to weekend, whether those were additions or subtractions. And leading the charge this week is actually Bob Marley, One Love. It was put back in theaters for 420. That's not a joke. It was actually put back in theaters to celebrate 420. It added 1,023 theaters this past weekend, bringing its total up to 1,104 theaters. The next biggest change was a theater loss. The First Omen lost 881 theaters. It's now in 2,430 theaters. Sasquatch Sunset added 847 theaters for a total of 856. So it went from a very, very small limited release to almost the most theaters that you can be in before you go into wide release at 1,000 theaters. Sting dropped 722 theaters, the vast majority of its theaters, 253 theaters remaining. So really audiences got 1 weekend to see that in theaters, and then it was pretty much pulled. Same with Arcadian starring Nicolas Cage. It lost 721 of its theaters. It remains in only 329 theaters. After looking at the box office reporting, I am declaring 2 movies closed this week. That means I did not see grosses for those movies reported for the weekend. One of them is Madam Web after 11 weeks with a $43.8 million gross. The second is Demon Slayer to the Hashira Training after 9 weeks. I'm surprised it was in theaters that long, with a $17.6 million domestic gross. And let's take a look at my profitability estimate for Madam Web. It was praised by many people, including myself, for having a fairly low budget, especially for a film in the superhero genre, although there were multiple reports again saying that the $80 million reported budget was actually lower than the actual budget. There was no number that was put on what the real budget may have been, so I'm going to maybe lowball it a little bit and say that it had a $100 million budget instead of that $80 million budget. So how does it look profitability-wise when you update those numbers? Well, first of all, when you look at the share from China, it made less than $1 million there, so only about $181,000 coming back from the Chinese market. About $22.2 million coming back from the international run. Madam Web only made about $55.6 million internationally. $17.6 million coming back from the first week domestically. $4.2 million coming back from domestic week 2, and $3.2 million coming back from domestic week 3 plus. It was an extremely front-loaded film. If you have a budget of $100 million, I found an advertising budget quoted at $60 million. That puts the film costs at $160 million. That's not bad given the genre, but the grosses were bad. The worldwide gross is just over $100 million. I'm estimating a net of $47.6 million against costs of $160 million. That's a projected theatrical shortfall of $112.3 million. However, Madam Web also had one of the most obvious product tie-in campaigns with Pepsi of any movie that I can remember. So they obviously got a pretty big chunk of change from Pepsi for putting their product literally all over the film. And who knows, with digital rentals and everything else, this could come close maybe to breaking even, but certainly not in the theatrical window. So as we approach the summer movie season, which starts in just a couple of weeks, believe it or not, the first weekend in May has become the official start of Hollywood's summer season. I wanted to take a little bit of a look at the box office for the year so far and how we really are stacking up against pre-pandemic, after the pandemic, etc. And we'll start with the chart that we look at every single week. It's what I like to call the road to recovery. The blue line that you see are the average weekend totals from 2015 through 2019 pre-pandemic. The red line are the average weekend totals from 2021 to 2023. And then the dotted black line is this year. And as you can see, the trend continues this week. We are not only far below where we were before the pandemic, but also we are far below where we have been since theaters reopened. We don't have a movie like the Super Mario Brothers movie in the marketplace right now. So a very depressing look at the box office the last few weeks after Dune Part 2 and Kung Fu Panda and some other films got us back above the average of where we have been for the last few years. The highest performing film in the 2015 through 2019 window was the opening of The Jungle Book back in 2016, Jon Favreau's reimagining. The highest performing film for 2021 through 2023 was the continued run of the Super Mario Brothers movie. But I didn't want to just look at this on a weekend to weekend basis. I also wanted to take a look at how the box office is doing when you look at it cumulatively. So basically, year-to-date box office, how much has it made so far, and where have we been in years past? This is the cumulative domestic box office through April for the last 10 years from 2015 through 2024. Now, our number this year will go up a little bit because we have one more weekend left in April, but there's no blockbuster film that's going to push that number significantly higher. And as you can see, from 2015 through 2019, the box office through April had already made over $3 billion, from $3.2 billion back in 2015 to $3.8 billion in 2018, with Black Panther leading the way. And then you can see 2020. The box office had made $1.7 billion through April in 2020, and that's because there were really only 2+ months where movies were coming out. This is inclusive of the first eras, the first stages of the box office shutdown. You can see in 2021 through April, the box office had made only $431.5 million, as very few films were coming out on a very staggered basis. Then in 2022, we saw a big rebound, $1.9 billion in grosses through April. Last year, $2.6 billion in grosses, which is a great jump up. But this year, we're pretty much back at 2022 levels. We're at $1.935 billion. We'll probably settle out a little over $2 billion, but we're going to be more than $500 million below where we were last year. And to even be about on par with 2022 is not great when you look at the output for those 2 years. From January through April in 2022, there were 338 movies across all of those months in the marketplace. This year, from January through April, there were 470 movies combined across all those months in the marketplace, which means that we've done about the same business as we did 2 years ago, despite 100+ more films being in theaters. What does that mean? It means it's not necessarily an inventory problem. It's not necessarily that there aren't enough movies in theaters. It's an interest problem. There are plenty of movies in theaters, but audiences just aren't interested in seeing them theatrically beyond a couple of banner titles like Dune Part 2. This is a chart that's similar to the road to recovery. I wanted to see how we stack up this year versus how we were doing before the pandemic. Again, this is cumulative weekly gross through 15 weeks. So this actually doesn't include this past weekend. Each weekend begins a new week. This is through basically Thursday of last week. And the way that I did this chart is that for every week, I had the gross from 2015 through 2019. Each week, I took the median number from those 5 years to represent the box office gross for that particular week. So we have the median gross for week 1, the median gross for week 2, 3, 4, etc. from 2015 through 2019. That was a way to try to normalize the data. People have asked why I don't use the median gross. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I use the average. And then, of course, I have the actual weekly gross for 2024. And really, this is not a pretty picture when we look at how this stacks up. So through 15 weeks, when you use the median weekend gross for every single week from 2015 through 2019, we're about $850 million behind where we were through 15 weeks pre-pandemic. This is the damage that has been done. And I use phrases like the road to recovery, but I think as we look at these charts and as we look at the box office grosses, the idea of getting back to where we were is getting further and further away from becoming a reality. Too many things have changed. Not just the pandemic, which of course did close down theaters for a while, but the complete change in the model. The fact that every studio pushed the audience towards streaming and is now trying to pull them back to the theaters, but a lot of those audience members aren't going back to theaters. The theatrical experience for a lot of people has degraded. The theaters themselves are having money problems. I know that certainly a couple of my regional chains, one in particular, really badly needs upgrading. There are broken seats, they're short-staffed, but the theaters don't have the money to make those improvements. So things have definitely changed. And now it's all about, well, how irrevocably has that theatrical model been altered? Now, it's tough because we had the strikes last year, which pushed things off the schedule and delayed them. So just when we were getting consistency, we now have a new X factor, and all of a sudden, wait till 2024 has now become wait till 2025. But I think even the most optimistic analyst would say that it's unlikely that these two lines are going to be in lockstep again anytime soon, short of a lot of folding of streaming services, etc., making the availability or the exclusivity of the theatrical model the way that it once was. I don't know if there's necessarily any going back. The real question, and the question that Hollywood's been trying to figure out forever now, is, okay, we have these new ways of doing business. How do we make money? How is it sustainable? Nobody seems to have the answer to that right now, but it's certainly not theatrical, at least not at the moment. It will sustain the big movies, but the medium and the lower budget movies are struggling to find an audience. We have so many more things left to talk about, but before we do, I want to thank the sponsor for this video, Miracle Made. This episode's brought to you by Miracle Made. People put all kinds of thought into how and when they sleep, finding that perfect balance of too tired or not tired enough. But do you know what one of the biggest impacts on sleep quality is? Your own temperature. And if you find yourself waking up with the night sweats or shivering under the covers, I recommend checking out Miracle Made sheets. Miracle Made sheets are designed to keep your body temperature at the right spot for you. Their silver-infused fabric was inspired by NASA to regulate your temperature, and they're also incredibly comfortable without the high price tag of other luxury brands. And as a bonus, Miracle Made sheets are also made to prevent up to 99.7% of bacteria growth, which means they smell better and you can keep them on longer. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code Dan at checkout, you'll also get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle's so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Dan and use the code Dan to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Dan to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Let's take a look now outside of the domestic marketplace at the top 5 films internationally. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is the top film outside of the US and Canada at $21.6 million, followed by Kung Fu Panda 4 at $15.3 million. Detective Conan: The $1 Million Pentagram continues a successful run in Japan at $11.9 million, followed by Civil War at $10.3 million, and Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire at $6.7 million. When you take those international grosses, you combine it with our domestic grosses, that gives you the top 5 films worldwide, and Godzilla Kong: The New Empire remains number 1, a 36.7% drop from last weekend, another $31.17 million added to its worldwide gross. Civil War, mainly driven by its domestic gross, is at number 2 at $21.4 million, a 28.5% drop worldwide from last weekend. Kung Fu Panda 4 drops 36.4% for $19.9 million in third place. Abigail, again fueled mostly by the domestic marketplace, is in 4th at $15.2 million, and Detective Conan: The $1 Million Pentagram drops 45.3% from last weekend at $11.9 million. Looking at the Legendary Monsterverse as far as worldwide grosses, Godzilla Kong: The New Empire has now bypassed Godzilla vs. Kong to become the 3rd highest grossing Legendary Monsterverse film at $486.8 million. It is headed toward that $500 million mark. If it can get to $530 million, it will pass Godzilla 2014. If it can get to $570 million, it will pass Kong Skull Island to become the highest grossing MonsterVerse film worldwide. Returning to the domestic front, these were the top per theater averages for April 19th through the 21st. At number 1 is the film Stress Positions, which made $29,934 in just one theater this past weekend. Stress Positions is a Sundance movie being released by Neon from director Theda Hammer, set during the pandemic. Remember that? In second place is a movie called We Grown Now, which made $3,927 per theater in 9 theaters. We Grown Now takes place in the Cabrini Green projects in Chicago in the 1990s and was nominated for Best Feature at the Film Independent Spirit Awards. It lost to Past Lives, no shame in that. In third place is Escape from Germany in 44 theaters at $3,758 per theater. That one again targeted largely to the Mormon market. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare actually made more per theater than Abigail because it was in fewer theaters. It played in 2,845 theaters and made $3,133 per theater. Abigail made $3,043 per theater in 3,384 theaters to come in fifth. Stress Positions wasn't just the top per theater average of this past weekend, it was one of the best of the year so far. The number 1 average belongs to The Taste of Things back in February, which made $43,350 per theater in 3 theaters. Then we had the small limited release of Love Lies Bleeding, which made $33,493 in 5 theaters back in March. Stress Positions comes in third, ahead of Problemista at $28,187, playing in 5 theaters. And then Godzilla Kong: The New Empire, the only wide release here on the best per theater average chart this year, at $20,721 in 3,861 theaters. Looking at the highest grossing films in limited release, this is 1,000 theaters or fewer. At number 1 was the Fathom live event of the Metropolitan Opera of La Rondine, which played in 733 theaters and brought in over $700,000 last weekend. The Long Game in 825 theaters is in second place with over $570,000 total. Then we had Sasquatch Sunset, which expanded to 856 theaters and brought in $473,000. I'll be interested to see what the theater count does next weekend because audience reaction reportedly very polarized to the film. In fourth place was Hard Miles, which played in 480 theaters and brought in around $200,000. Hard Miles is about a group of young convicts who go on a life-changing bike ride, and the film stars Matthew Modine. And in fifth place is Irina's Vow, which was being distributed by Fathom. It's about a Polish woman trying to save a group of Jewish workers during the Holocaust. It was in an unknown number of theaters and brought in $197,899. Looking at the top grosses for this year, let's start domestically. Dune Part 2 remains number 1 at $276.6 million. Kung Fu Panda's in second place at $180 million. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire is quickly gaining, though. It's currently in third place, but it's at $171.7 million. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is in fourth. Bob Marley: One Love is in fifth. Mean Girls is in sixth. The Beekeepers in seventh. Argyle is in eighth. Civil War enters the chart at number 9 at $44.8 million. That knocks Madam Web down 1 spot to number 10, and that knocks Night Swim off the chart altogether. Looking at the highest grossing films worldwide for this year so far, Dune Part 2 is very close to breaking $700 million worldwide. It is the highest grossing film of 2024 to date at $696.6 million. Godzilla Kong: The New Empire moves up 3 spots since last week to number 2 at $486.8 million. Kung Fu Panda 4 moves up to number 3 at $481.6 million. So we now have 3 Hollywood films occupying the top 3 for 2024 worldwide. The Chinese films YOLO and Pegasus 2 both moved down 2 spots to numbers 4 and 5. Article 20 and Boonie Bear's Time Twist, 2 other Chinese films, remain at numbers 6 and 7. Bob Marley: One Love is at number 8. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is at number 9. And The Beekeeper is at number 10. This is the worldwide box office 365-day chart, although as many people pointed out, yes, it is technically because of the leap year, a 366-day chart. This covers April 23rd, 2023 to April 23rd, 2024, and it's on the show because there is an update. Dune Part 2 is now the 5th highest grossing film for the last year as the calendar goes. Barbie and Oppenheimer are numbers 1 and 2. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is at number 3. Dune Part 2 has a good shot of overtaking Fast X to become number 4 on that list. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse drops down 1 spot to number 6. Wonka's at number 7. The Little Mermaid is at number 8. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 is at number 9. And No More Bets is at number 10. And that does it for Charts with Dan for this week. Looking at the movies that'll be hitting theaters this upcoming weekend, as I mentioned on Wednesday night, A24 is doing a special presentation of Hereditary in IMAX theaters around the country. So if you haven't seen Hereditary, or if you want to see it in IMAX theaters for the first time, go check it out. I will definitely be there. Opening on Friday, we have the delayed film Challengers, starring Zendaya, directed by Luca Guadagnino, which was slated for a release last fall. It is now hitting theaters here in the spring. Boy Kills World, starring Bill Skarsgård, is also hitting theaters this weekend. Unsung Hero, a film aimed largely at the Christian market, will also be hitting many theaters around the country. And then we have 2 re-releases coming up this weekend. One of them is Alien, which is being re-released to celebrate its 45th anniversary. The other is Brendan Fraser's 1999 Mummy, which is having a 25th, believe it or not, anniversary re-release. So if you like either of those films, you have a chance to see them on the big screen this weekend. And that does it for the show this week. Stay tuned right here on the channel. I've got reviews. I think I'm going to try to work on, I finished Fallout finally and really liked it. So I'm going to try to get my review of Fallout here this week. I'm doing a little bit of traveling, but I'm going to try to catch at least Challengers and review it here on the channel, as well as some other stuff. So you never know what's going to pop up. Thanks so much for spending part of your day here with me. Thanks to Miracle Made for sponsoring part of the video. And until next time, stay safe. Bye.